What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a late-night stage expecting a normal conversation, only to be blindsided by a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 42 seconds, Stephen Colbert would say something so shocking, so completely out of line, that Denzel Washington would make a decision that would leave the entire studio in stunned silence. The evening started like any other taping of The Late Show. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear, promoting his latest directorial project. People in the crowd were thrilled. This was Denzel, an icon, a legend, someone who had earned every bit of respect in the entertainment industry through decades of incredible work and unwavering professionalism. Denzel walked out onto the stage with that calm, confident presence he's known for. The audience erupted in applause. He smiled, waved, and took his seat across from Stephen Colbert. The first few minutes seemed normal enough. They exchanged pleasantries. Colbert asked about the new film. Denzel spoke passionately about the project, about the story he wanted to tell, about the incredible cast he had worked with. But then something shifted. Colbert leaned back in his chair with this strange smirk on his face. "So Denzel," he said, "let's talk about something real for a second. You've been in this industry for what, 40 years now? Something like that?" Denzel replied, still cordial, still professional. Right. Colbert continued, his tone changing slightly. "And in all that time, you've played a lot of different roles. But I'm curious, do you ever feel like maybe you've been playing it a little too safe? Like maybe you've been more concerned with protecting your image than actually taking risks?" The audience got quiet. You could feel the energy in the room change. Denzel's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Confusion? Maybe. Or the beginning of realization that this wasn't going to be a normal interview. "I don't think that's fair," Denzel said, his voice measured. "I've taken plenty of risks in my career. I've played complex characters, directed challenging films, worked with new voices in the industry." Sure, Colbert said, waving his hand dismissively. "But let's be honest. When was the last time you really put yourself out there? When was the last time you did something that might actually damage that carefully crafted reputation of yours?" Denzel shifted in his seat. "Stephen, I'm not sure what you're getting at here." "What I'm getting at," Colbert said, leaning forward now, his voice taking on an edge, "is that maybe you're not quite the artist everyone thinks you are. Maybe you're just really good at playing the game." The audience was dead silent now. A few people gasped. Denzel's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "I think that's a pretty disrespectful thing to say to someone you invited onto your show." "Disrespectful?" Colbert laughed. "Oh, come on, Denzel. You've been in Hollywood long enough. You can take a little honesty, can't you? Or is that image too fragile?" "This isn't honesty," Denzel said, his voice firm now. "This is you trying to create a moment at my expense, and I'm not interested in playing along." Colbert's smirk widened. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't even handle a real conversation. Everything has to be on your terms, doesn't it? Everything has to be about protecting Denzel Washington, the brand. A real conversation involves respect." Denzel shot back. "Something you seem to be lacking right now." "Respect?" Colbert scoffed. "You want respect? You come on here to promote your movie, to use my platform, my audience, and you expect me to just sit here and lob you softball questions? To treat you like you're untouchable? I expect you to treat me like a human being," Denzel said, his voice rising. Slightly. "Like someone who has earned their place in this industry through hard work and dedication. Not like some target for whatever point you're trying to prove tonight." Colbert leaned back again, that infuriating smirk still plastered on his face. "You know what I think? I think you've bought into your own hype. I think you've spent so long being told you're great that you actually believe you're above criticism." The audience was starting to murmur now. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. But Colbert kept going. "And another thing," he continued, "let's talk about your new movie. I watched it. You want to know what I really thought?" "I'm not sure I do," Denzel said quietly. "I thought it was self-indulgent," Colbert declared. "I thought it was exactly the kind of safe, predictable project that someone makes when they're more interested in winning awards than actually saying something meaningful." Denzel stared at him for a long moment. "You invited me, here to ambush me." "I invited you here to have an honest conversation," Colbert countered. "But you can't handle honesty, can you?" There's a difference between honesty and cruelty, Denzel said. Between having a real discussion and what you're doing right now, which is trying to tear someone down for entertainment. Oh, please, Colbert said, rolling his eyes. Don't play the victim card. You're a powerful man in Hollywood. You can handle a little pushback. Pushback? Denzel's voice was sharp now. This isn't pushback. This is you being deliberately antagonistic. This is you trying to make yourself look edgy by disrespecting your guest. Colbert laughed again, and it was a cold sound. You really can't handle this, can you? You really need everyone to worship at the altar of Denzel Washington. I need people to show basic human decency, Denzel replied. Something you're clearly struggling with tonight. Basic human decency, Colbert repeated mockingly. That's rich. Coming from someone who's built their entire career on being untouchable, on being above it all. I've built my career on hard work, Denzel said firmly, on respecting the craft, on respecting my colleagues, on respecting the audience. All things you're failing to do right now. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. The audience didn't know how to react. The crew looked uncomfortable, but Colbert pressed on. You know what your problem is? He said. You take yourself way too seriously. You act like everything you do is some profound artistic statement, when really, you're just another actor trying to stay relevant. Denzel took a slow breath. I think we're done here. Oh, we're done when I say we're done, Colbert snapped. This is my show. No, Denzel said, standing up. We're done when I decide I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected anymore. Sit down, Colbert demanded. We're in the middle of an interview. An interview requires two willing participants, Denzel said calmly, and I'm no longer willing to participate in whatever this is. Colbert's face flushed. You're really going to walk off my show? You're really that thin-skinned? I'm really that unwilling to be treated like garbage on national television, Denzel replied. There's a difference. This is unbelievable, Colbert said, his voice rising. You come on here, you use my platform, and then you can't handle a little tough questioning? Tough questioning? Denzel's voice was incredulous now. You haven't asked me a single legitimate question. You've just spent the last several minutes insulting me, insulting my work, and trying to provoke me into some kind of reaction that you can use for ratings. That's not what this is, Colbert protested, but his voice lacked conviction. That's exactly what this is, Denzel said, and I'm not going to be part of it. The audience was starting to react now. Some people were clapping for Denzel, others looked shocked. A few were booing Colbert. You're making a huge mistake, Colbert said, his voice tight. You're going to look bad walking off like this. I'll take my chances, Denzel said, because the alternative is sitting here and letting you continue to disrespect me for your own entertainment. Disrespect? Colbert's voice was getting louder. I'm just trying to have a real conversation. No, Denzel said firmly. You're trying to create drama. You're trying to take someone down to make yourself feel important, and I'm not going to help you do that. Colbert stood up now too, his face red. You think you're better than this show? Better than me? I think I deserve better than this, Denzel replied. And so does your audience. My audience came here to see you, Colbert shot back. And you're walking out on them? I'm walking out on you, Denzel corrected. There's a difference. And I think your audience understands that. The applause was growing louder now. More people were standing. Not for Colbert, but for Denzel. This is my show, Colbert yelled. You can't just leave. Watch me, Denzel said quietly. He turned toward the audience and gave a small nod. I apologize to all of you, he said. You came here expecting a normal conversation, and instead you got this. That's not fair to you. The audience roared their approval. They understood. They saw what had happened. They saw a man being pushed too far by a host who seemed more interested in creating conflict than having a genuine conversation. Colbert was sputtering now, trying to regain control of the situation. Denzel, come on, don't be ridiculous. Sit back down. Let's finish this. There's nothing to finish, Denzel said. You made your choice about what kind of interview this was going to be, and I'm making my choice about whether to continue being part of it. You're being oversensitive, Colbert tried. I was just trying to push you a little, to get past the usual promotional talking points. There's a way to do that with respect, Denzel said. You chose a different path. Colbert's expression changed. The smirk was gone. Now he just looked angry. Fine. Walk off. Show everyone how you can dish it out, but can't take it. I can take plenty, Denzel said, but I don't have to take this. Nobody does. He started walking toward the exit. The audience was on their feet now, most of them applauding. Colbert called after him, his voice desperate now, angry. "You're proving my point, Denzel. You're proving that you can't handle anyone challenging you." Denzel stopped and turned back. "You didn't challenge me, Stephen. You attacked me. There's a difference. A challenge comes from a place of respect, of wanting to explore ideas and push boundaries. What you did came from somewhere else entirely." "Oh, spare me the lecture," Colbert snapped. "You asked for honesty," Denzel said. "Here's some honesty. You used your position as host, your power, in this situation, to try to belittle a guest. And when that guest refused to accept that treatment, you tried to make it seem like they were the problem. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just cruelty dressed up as boldness." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked around at his audience, many of whom were staring at him with disappointment in their eyes. "I've been doing this a long time," Denzel continued. "I've been interviewed by hundreds of people. I've had tough questions. I've had people disagree with me, challenge my work, push me to think differently. I welcome that. But what you did tonight wasn't any of those things. It was just mean." "I wasn't being mean," Colbert protested weakly. "I was being provocative." "You were being a bully," Denzel said simply. "And I'm too old and too tired to sit here and pretend that's okay." The studio was completely silent now. Even the crew had stopped moving. Everyone was watching this moment unfold, witnessing something that almost never happens on live television. "You know what the sad thing is?" Denzel said, his voice softer now. "You have a great platform here. You have the ability to have meaningful conversations with interesting people, but instead you chose to do this, to try to tear someone down. And for what? A few extra clicks online? Some controversy to drive ratings?" Colbert didn't answer. He just stood there, his earlier confidence completely deflated. "I hope whatever you were trying to accomplish was worth it," Denzel said, "because you lost something tonight. You lost the respect of a lot of people in this room. And you lost any chance of having a real, honest conversation with me." He turned back toward the exit. Colbert made one last attempt. "Denzel, wait, please. Can we start over?" Denzel paused but didn't turn around. "No," he said quietly. "We can't. Because now I know what kind of interview this really was, and I'm not interested in giving you a second chance to disrespect me." The audience erupted in applause again as Denzel walked off the stage. Colbert stood there alone, looking out at a crowd that was no longer on his side. His band didn't play. His announcer didn't try to salvage the moment with a joke. There was just silence and the sound of people clapping for a man who had refused to be treated poorly. Colbert tried to compose himself to regain some semblance of control. "Well," he said, his voice shaky, "that was unexpected." But the audience wasn't having it. Some people were already walking out. Others were shaking their heads. The energy in the room had completely shifted. "I guess," Colbert continued, trying for a joke that fell completely flat, "I guess Denzel wasn't ready for a real conversation." Someone in the audience yelled, "No, you weren't." Another voice called out, "You were completely out of line." Colbert looked rattled now. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the clever host, the one who asked the tough questions, who got past the celebrity facade. Instead, he had pushed too far, crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed, and paid the price for it. His producers were frantically signaling to go to commercial. Colbert nodded, looking relieved to have an escape. "We'll be right back," he said, but his voice had none of its usual energy. As the show cut away, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. A major Hollywood star had walked off his show, not because of a technical difficulty, not because of a scheduling conflict, but because the host had treated him so poorly that continuing the interview became impossible. Backstage, Denzel was surrounded by members of the crew, many of whom were apologizing, telling him they had no idea the interview was going to go that way. He thanked them graciously, because that's who he is. Even in the midst of being disrespected, even after walking off a major television show, he still had the grace to be kind to the people around him. Meanwhile, back on stage, Colbert was getting an earful from his producers. They were angry, they were panicked. This was a disaster. But more than that, they were confused. Why had he gone after Denzel like that? What was he thinking? What was the point? And Colbert didn't have good answers. He mumbled something about wanting to do something different, about being tired of softball interviews, about thinking Denzel could handle it. But the excuses rang hollow. Everyone knew what this really was. It was a host drunk on his own power, convinced that his platform gave him the right to treat people however he wanted. When the show came back from commercial, Colbert was alone on stage. No guest to finish the interview with, no backup plan. Just him, trying to fill time, trying to explain what had happened without actually taking responsibility for it. "So, as you saw," he said, attempting a casual tone that didn't quite land, "Denzel decided to leave. I guess he didn't appreciate my line of questioning." The audience was cold. No laughs, no applause, just silence. "Look," Colbert continued, starting to sound defensive, "I was just trying to have an honest conversation. I was trying to get past the usual promotional stuff and really talk about his work, his career. But I guess that's not what he wanted." Someone in the audience yelled, "You were being disrespectful." Colbert ignored it, or tried to. Sometimes, in journalism, you have to push a little. You have to ask the tough questions. You have to challenge your guests. But the audience wasn't buying it. They had seen what happened. They knew the difference between tough questions and what Colbert had done. They knew he had crossed a line. Anyway, Colbert said, clearly eager to move on, "We've got a great show for you tonight. Coming up, we have." But people were still walking out. The damage was done. The show would go on, because shows always go on. But something had fundamentally changed. The trust between host and audience had been broken. The implicit agreement that everyone was there in good faith had been shattered. In his dressing room, Denzel was calm. He wasn't angry, or at least he wasn't showing it. He was disappointed, sure. Disappointed that a simple promotional interview had turned into whatever that was. Disappointed that a host would use his platform that way, but he wasn't surprised. He had been in the industry long enough to know that sometimes people let the power go to their heads. Sometimes people forget that there are human beings on the other side of their questions. His publicist was on the phone doing damage control. Though there wasn't much damage to control, Denzel had done nothing wrong. He had been professional, had tried to answer questions respectfully, and had only left when it became clear that the host had no intention of treating him with basic dignity. If anything, he looked better for walking away. He looked like someone who knew his worth and refused to be diminished. Back on stage, Colbert was struggling through the rest of his show. His other guests seemed uncomfortable. His jokes weren't landing. The entire energy was off. And through it all, there was this sense that something significant had happened. That this wasn't just another late-night interview gone wrong. This was a moment that revealed something about power, about respect, about what happens when someone finally says, "No, I'm not going to accept this." As the show ended and the studio cleared out, Colbert sat alone at his desk. The adrenaline was wearing off. The reality of what had happened was setting in. He had brought one of the most respected actors in Hollywood onto his show and had treated him so poorly that the man had walked off. Not stormed off in a fit of rage, but walked off with dignity, making it clear that he simply would not tolerate being treated that way. And the worst part, the part that Colbert was only now beginning to understand, was that he had no one to blame but himself. He had made the choice to conduct the interview that way. He had decided to be provocative, to push boundaries, to try to create a moment. And he had succeeded in creating a moment, just not the one he had intended. The moment he created was one where a guest stood up for themselves, where someone refused to play along with a host's ego trip, where dignity won out over spectacle. And in doing so, Denzel Washington had shown everyone watching what it looks like to maintain your self-respect, even when someone with power is trying to take it away from you. The evening had started with excitement, with anticipation of a great conversation between a talented host and a legendary actor. It ended with an empty chair, a humbled host, and a powerful reminder that respect isn't optional. It's not something that can be sacrificed for entertainment or ratings or the illusion of edgy television. It's the foundation of any genuine human interaction, and when it's absent, nothing else matters. Denzel had made his choice in that moment. He could have stayed. He could have tried to power through. He could have given Colbert more chances to disrespect him, all in the name of promoting his film. But instead, he chose himself. He chose his dignity. He chose to draw a line and say, "This is how I expect to be treated. And if you can't do that, then I don't need to be here." It was a simple choice, really. But in the world of entertainment, where people are often expected to endure all kinds of treatment for the sake of publicity, for the sake of playing the game, it was also a radical one. It was a statement that even the most powerful platform, even the biggest television show, even the most watched late-night program doesn't have the right to treat people poorly. that there are some things more important than promotion, more important than ratings, more important than playing nice for the cameras. And as Denzel left the studio that night, walking out into the evening air with his head held high, he carried with him the respect of everyone who had witnessed what happened. Not because he had thrown a tantrum or made a scene, but because he had quietly, firmly, and with complete dignity said, "I deserve better than this." And he had been absolutely right.